Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host Khalid. But today is Monday the 12th of August 2024, just 2 days before our Independence Day. Lots and lots of people are garnering up to get badges, get flags of Pakistan, and this whole enthusiasm is also there and has been accentuated because of Arshad Nadeem. Well, that is another thing whatsoever, but today we're going to talk about other topics. Let's begin without further ado. Our first story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the Palestine-Israel war, which has entered its day 311. We've seen the dastardly attack on Saturday on a school in which 100 people, 100 children were killed, mostly children, but of course 100 people were killed. And Pakistan has also condemned it in the strongest of words. They said this hasn't stopped Israel from doing what it wants and how it wants and where it wants. And it is also pushing the Palestinians to go from one place to the other. So there's this displacement, this deliberate displacement of the Palestinians from one corner of Palestine to the other corner of Palestine. This and more is also going to be highlighted in our first segment when we'll talk about day 311 of the Israel-Palestine conflict. Our second story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the recurrent incidents of uranium theft that have been happening in India. The latest incident comes on the 8th of August, and this is not us, this is the Indian media that has been reporting it. The Bihar police have arrested 3 persons from Gopalganj district and have recovered 50 grams of a radioactive substance from them, which is worth crores of rupees. This is not the first time this has happened, and we'll be highlighting that and more in our second segment. We'll be back after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and our first story today concerns Gaza conflict, the conflict that is going on between the Palestinians and Israel since 311 days, and shows no signs of abating. We've been joined by Waqar Rizvi. He's a senior geopolitical analyst. Thank you very much, Waqar, to have joined us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. We'll begin without further ado. I'll begin with what happened on Saturday with another school that was bombarded by Israel. More than 100 people were killed as a result. It's not the first time. UNRWA talks about around 8 schools that have been targeted in the past as well. There is a complete disregard whether it comes to schools, whether it comes to hospitals, whether it comes to other institutions, or even when it comes to human life. Pakistan also, in a statement yesterday, talks about this dastardly attack and talks about violation of international humanitarian law and war crimes. It says that international community, especially the US and the backers of Israel, should take immediate steps to bring an end to this Gaza genocide and protect the people of Gaza. My question to you is, will there be any action taken by the backers of Israel, because we've been seeing this since the 7th of October 2023, or do you feel there is some kind of guilt or conscience that has kind of resurged in the backers of Israel, and they might make a decision that would end this war?
To be very honest, Omar, I don't think anything is going to change. As you said, this is not the first school that has been attacked in Gaza. As always, the Israelis will claim, and they have claimed this time around, as you are well aware, that Hamas was operating from this school. Hamas was not those innocent people who had just gone to pray, and Israel attacked the school during prayer time, in fact. So considering the world has not acted in the previous 8 times, or the previous times innocent human lives have been lost in their tens of thousands now in Gaza, there's really no expectation that they will now. Something that you pointed out earlier in your question is a very important point to make, and that is just simply the hypocrisy of which human life is worth enough to the international community to act. And the international community has proven that a Palestinian life is simply not worth enough to act upon.
I have to agree with you on that, but in the same vein, I'd like to add some figures. 22 Palestinians are killed on Sunday after this attack on the school. 25 Palestinians are killed in Gaza in the last 24 hours. 13 people have been received in Nasser Hospital who've been killed in Khan Yunis. 39,897 people till I came here in the studios had been butchered by the Israelis, and around 92,152 have been injured. The real figures as per Lancet even talks about more than 186,000 who have been killed, because there are so many bodies that are unaccounted for. 10,000, more than 10,000 Palestinians have been detained by Israel since this war began. Are these just not some of the examples of the blatant ethnic cleansing of the crimes against humanity?
They very much are. And, this is something that the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the Palestinian territories, Francesca Albanese, she has repeatedly pointed this out, and she gets a lot of hate for this on social media. Nevertheless, she's quite brave in pointing out that this is, in fact, ethnic cleansing / a genocide. It's one thing when the Israelis talk about their hostages, right? But as you pointed out, there are so many innocent Palestinians who have been held in what Israel calls administrative detention. So obviously, as we've discussed, the loss of innocent human life is one very, very important and the overarching point in all of this. But even if we are to take the Israeli rhetoric at face value, if their hostages are worth enough for them to be doing all of the above killing, then what of the Palestinian hostages who are in Israeli custody, who have no charges against them, are simply held for the fact that Israel wishes to hold them, because it says it fears that they may at some point carry out attacks. And by the way, this includes hundreds of minors as well. So in what world, under what legal system, anywhere in the world, is it okay legally to hold a child, and that too without charge?
Waqar, this is something that we have talked before as well, and this is something that I fail to understand, and there's a certain duplicity, hypocrisy that I see in world politics when it comes to issues such as Palestine or even the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir issue. And I don't know how the world body or the powers that be can be persuaded to do the needful. This said, when it comes to Israel also, it's not just butchering them, it's not just, injuring them, it's not just bombarding them. They also push them to flee from one place to the other, whether it be from Rafah to Gaza, from Gaza to Rafah, from one part of Gaza to the other part of Gaza. Now they have been forced to flee Khan Yunis, and without any kind of amenity whatsoever, whether it be food, water, medicine, or even a shelter. What is the fate of the Palestinians if they can't even stay at one place? They are butchered when they move from one place to the other. Then they are told to move from A to B, B to C, C to A. This has been going on since quite some time. I don't understand this whole complexity of the situation and how to deal with it. What's your take on it?
See, it's quite clear what the goal here is, right? As you've said, there is complete disregard for if the Israelis have told Palestinians in Gaza to move from one location to another, saying that other location is safe, and then they attack it anyways, claiming again that Hamas is operating from there without any proof, by the way. They've never ever shown evidence. It's simply we're all supposed to believe them, but yet we're not supposed to believe Hamas when its Ministry of Health tells us how many people have been killed. So it all comes down really to the international community. It's one thing, and I was watching a video recently of a Palestinian woman, and she spoke very powerfully where she said, listen, we don't want the world to necessarily fight for us, but we at least want the world to stop supporting the Israeli machine. And that's quite a powerful statement to make, because it's not just about picking up guns or whatever we may think vis-a-vis defending the Palestinian people. It's about also speaking out against Israel and or at least not supporting Israel at international fora. So this goes not only for the Western world, but even for the Muslim/Arab world, where those countries that do have diplomatic relations with Israel really need to think twice, thrice, quadruple times about whether or not this is really worth to keep going, and what kind of a message this sends to Israel, the kind of carte blanche it may possibly be giving Israel to continue its atrocities.
We seem to observe this carte blanche that has been given and has been given in the past as well. But since the 7th of October, this is one blatant example that I haven't seen in the last many decades, at least since the Second World War. Brings to mind many of the earlier genocides as well. But what I want and I'm sure you also would advocate for, is some kind of a peace deal, some kind of a truce agreement. There is a peace deal that Joe Biden has been pushing for since quite some time, a three-phase deal which includes many important factors that have been listed very clearly. Now Hamas calls on the US, Qatar and Egypt to submit a plan to implement this ceasefire proposal that has been put forward by the US president, instead of holding more rounds of negotiations and discussing new proposals for Gaza. Why aren't the other partners complying with it when it is the US in fact that is pushing for this plan?
Because the US doesn't really have the cards that it used to have to play anymore. We all know Joe Biden is now a lame duck president. He's announced that he's not even running in November this year anymore. So Kamala Harris has made confusing statements about what her specific plans are vis-a-vis Israel, even though she has said she will not clearly stop supplying Israel with weapons. But she has also tried, especially after disastrous appearance in Dearborn, Michigan, where there are a lot of Muslims and Arabs, where she essentially told protesters that if you protest against me, you're voting for Donald Trump, which is quite a low ball statement to make considering they were protesting her stance on Palestine. But I think that really it comes down to the fact that, as I said, Israel, the United States doesn't actually hold all the cards anymore. I feel like the Israelis at this point, I mean, if the word is carte blanche or if it's just that they feel empowered in whatever way possible, that they do not believe that anyone's really going to hold them to account and or really stop them. So if we have statements of condemnation, that in and of itself will not do enough to deter the Israelis, because at this point they seem motivated to go full steam forward without anybody really taking any action. This is not going to stop.
Waqar, you talk of empowering the Israelis. The Israelis are being empowered by the machinery, by the weaponry that has been supplied to them specifically by the United States of America. And speaking of which, you talked of Kamala Harris. She says she will not support an arms embargo on Israel. How do you take this statement under the current scenario when on one hand, when Netanyahu visited the US, she was quite firm with him as per the reports regarding Palestine. But now she says there's not going to be an arms embargo. It is this same weaponry that is being used by Israel to butcher the thousands and thousands and tens of thousands, let's put it that way, Palestinians. Until and unless this supply of weaponry doesn't end, the war will not end. What's your take? Do you feel that some kind of legislation needs to be put into place to end this supply of weaponry, or will it continue unabated?
So actually, to the best of my knowledge, and I'm not a legal expert, to the best of my knowledge, though, there is, in fact, already U.S. legislation in place, which actually does bar the U.S. from supplying weapons to states where it knows that there are human rights violations taking place. And you may remember this has happened a number of times with the weapons that the U.S. supplies to other nations around the world. And there are many of them, so I won't start naming them. That's quite a long list, where there are human rights concerns, at least in the Americans' eyes. So then that weapon supply to them and or military aid to them can sometimes become an issue where then the president has to sign executive orders and or Congress has to debate this. But all of the above does not happen for Israel. Or if it does, it's pretty much an across-the-board agreement on the part of congressmen as well as the White House. And so Israel is always the exception in this regard. So even by U.S. standards, it should not at this point be supplying the weapons, and in fact should be investigating the Israelis for the very human rights violations which it accuses many of the other countries which it provides military aid and or weapons to for carrying out.
Let's talk about the assassinations of Ismail Haniyeh and Fawad Shukr. Now, Joe Biden has again warned Iran the day before yesterday about a possible retaliatory attack against Israel amidst these tensions that have been going on in the Middle East. Now, Biden, while responding to reporters before entering his vehicle, when he was asked, "What's your message to Iran?" he said, "Don't." Now, Biden had issued the same warning more or less in April this year as well, before Iran carried out a rocket and drone attack against Israel in retaliation for the April 1 airstrike on its diplomatic facility in Damascus. I'd like to understand, Iran somehow seems to be holding back as its retaliation to what happened to Ismail Haniyeh within Iranian territories, and also not concerning Iran, but of course Hezbollah when it comes to Fawad Shukr. How do you see? Do you feel that the retaliatory attacks will be strong enough, or do you feel diplomacy could take the forefront and dissipate the situation?
So, as somebody who's lived in Iran for 13 years, the Iranian psyche is very important to understand. I'm just going to say this very briefly so that people understand why the Iranians are a lot angrier this time around than even when Qasem Soleimani was assassinated when he had arrived in Iraq. And they had responded that time as well, but pretty quickly. This is very different because even as the Supreme Leader said, Ayatollah Khamenei, that you have killed, to the Israelis that is, that you've killed a guest that came into our home. And, as many Westerners may not understand that concept, but in this part of the world, for us, when we host somebody in this part of the world, be it the Middle East or South Asia, or Asia in general, in fact, that is seen as something very, very sacred. A host has a very sacred position, or a guest has a very sacred position, I should say. So for a guest to then be killed sitting in Iran, and that to a Palestinian official, a Hamas official, no less, this is seen as somewhat of a slap in the face, an egg on the face, really, of the Iranian intelligence, as well as just Iran as a whole. So Iran is in this very tough position where, yes, as you said, I think that there is an effort behind the scenes, even within the Iranian establishment, to try to resolve this diplomatically. But because Ayatollah Khamenei said very clearly, he used the word duty. So he said that in Farsi, but he also tweeted that very word in English as well, so there will be no confusion. He has never used the word duty to say that it is our duty to retaliate against this attack. He's always said it is our right. So even when Qasem Soleimani had been killed, he used the word right even at that point, even though Qasem Soleimani was extremely important for the Iranians. So that's one thing to put out of the way, that when we say that there may or may not be a retaliation, and it's obviously none of us have a crystal ball, so we don't know for sure. But I strongly feel that there will be one, simply because of this Iranian psyche and the way that they may be thinking about this. How strong that retaliation would be, what kind of form it may take, those are huge question marks at this point. Certainly, if it's a very strong retaliation, the Israelis will then respond, and then we will officially be in some sort of a war. On the part of Hezbollah, because again, this was a Hezbollah official, this is sort of like a Qasem Soleimani situation again. Even though, yes, he was a very important Hezbollah official, I do not necessarily see that front going into a war unless, and there's one theory that after the Haniyeh assassination, we may see a quadrilateral attack on Israel, where not only Iran, but Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, and others in the region, so 4 groups in total, may attack Israel in one go. If that does occur, then of course the Israelis will attack on all fronts.
Last question, Waqar, I'd like to understand the after effects of this whole war that has escalated since the 7th of October. A, the regionalization of the war and the implication it could have on other countries is looming large on a lot of people's heads. Secondly, Islamophobia and the effects that it has had on the Muslims, Palestinians or otherwise in different parts of the world is also quite imminent. I mean, the Council of American Islamic Relations Advocacy talks about, rise of about 70% of discrimination and attacks against Muslims in the first half of 2024 alone. Do you feel, even though the war ends at one time or it doesn't, the after effects are going to loom in the form of Islamophobia and racial attacks for years to come?
That's been the trend even before this war. But yes, it's been heightened and has increased exponentially because of what's happening in Gaza. So, we've seen this even at the Olympics. We've seen the way Muslim athletes have been spoken about, especially female ones. The fact that France banned the hijab for its own athletes, but even beyond that, just female athletes who do not even maybe observe the hijab or Muslim. Just the way that they're spoken about, the terms that are used to describe them, the terms that are used to describe pro-Palestinian protesters anywhere in the Western world. The fact that you cannot, in fact, even really talk about Palestine very openly in many of these societies, which keep telling the rest of us in the world that they have freedom of speech, that they respect people's right to express themselves freely. And this is especially, of course, targeting the Muslim community. We've seen what's been happening in the UK with the far right riots there and the attacks on mosques as well as Muslims, some very violent attacks. So, this is a trend that's been going on anyways, but yes, since October 7th, whether directly or indirectly due to it has definitely increased. And I don't see that trend ending even if the war were to end.
Thank you so Very much, Waqar, to have joined us. Waqar is the senior geopolitical analyst joining us and discussing the Palestine-Israel situation, day 311, with us in detail. Thank you so very much to have joined us. Let's come to our second segment, and that concerns the recurrent incidents of uranium thefts in India that not only pose a threat to India but also to the region and to the world in large. The latest incident has seen itself in the media on the 8th of August this very year, when people were apprehended with 50 grams of a very important nuclear material, not the first time, and this has been going on since the 1970s and 80s and 90s and 2000s, and there is a whole lot of list of incidents that has happened, but unfortunately we don't see any reaction from the world bodies or IAEA or even the West as far as this is concerned, despite the fact that the US has a peaceful nuclear deal with India since quite a number of years. To discuss that and more, we've been joined by Anum A. She's a strategic and nuclear energy expert. Anum, thank you very much to have joined us. Anum, the latest incident happens on the 8th of August this year. Police arrest 3 persons from Gopalganj district, discover 50 grams of radioactive substance that is called californium, and it is used in nuclear reactors, starting them, optimizing coal power plants, treatment of cancer and oil drilling. But of course, the nuclear angle is extremely important, and the fact that it is discovered by people, on people in Bihar is raises a lot of questions. Do you view this incident as a serious security lapse, or is there much more to it?
Thank you very much for calling me. Coming to this very pertinent topic, because you see, when you talk about radiation, it does not respect any boundaries. So that is something that we have to keep in mind. So this one security lapse is just not one that you already mentioned. It is a series of lapses that have already happened, and because of that there have been concerns within India by different scientists as well, different people from their Department of Energy, from their regulatory board as well, who have said that we need to have better regulatory mechanism, because the whole idea is not just about one incident happening. It is about whole of the supply chain from production, mining to even getting it out of storage and using the material.
You talk of regulatory mechanisms that need to be put into place. There's a lack of an independent nuclear regulatory body that has been a central issue as far as India is concerned. The Atomic Energy Regulatory Board is operating under the Department of Atomic Energy, which which of course limits its autonomy and its effectiveness as well. International bodies including IAEA have repeatedly recommended that India establish an independent regulatory authority to oversee nuclear safety and security. However, this progress hasn't been made. Isn't the safety, in your point of view, of these materials, like you pointed out, a national responsibility for India, and the potential consequences of any failure in this area that we've been seeing since the 1970s could have severe implications not only for India but for the entire region? But this has been going on since decades. This is what we see in 2024 is nothing new. Go back the years, and I mean there's a whole list.
Yes. Another important aspect is, as I said, that there are people from inside within India who have raised concerns about this. For example, there was an IAS officer, the IPS officer, who had said to Indian regulatory body as well as to the committee that there are many lapses that are happening. We need a regulatory body which is independent from Department of Energy. But that did not happen. That bill never saw the light of the day at Lok Sabha. And similarly, even when Prime Minister Modi was elected in his previous term, there were many incidents of corruption cases being filed in uranium mining as well. So all these things are of a serious concern. Why? Because if something happens in India, and if there is a radiological incident that happens, then there can be non-state actors that can use that material for making dirty bombs.
India kind of makes what it calls quote unquote mistakes. The BrahMos missile incident, for example, had it been had a nuclear had it been made nuclearized for whichever reason, we could have lost one city or even more. But the fact is that incidents such as these in India have been happening for quite some time. If you look at, I mean, just last year, I was just looking at the different list. It's 2001, 6.4 kgs of uranium in Jharkhand, 7 kgs of uranium in Maharashtra are confiscated by Indian authorities. 26 August 2021, 250 kgs of uranium variant worth $573 million is confiscated in Kolkata. December 2006, a container packed with radioactive material is stolen from a fortified research facility. 2008, police arrest 5 people in Meghalaya on charge of smuggling uranium core. 2009, Mumbai crime branch arrests 3 people for illegally possessing 5 kgs of depleted material. 1994, 1998, 2000, 2001, 2003, 8, 9, 16, 18. I mean, there is, I mean, I can even go beyond that. Doesn't the theft, I mean, just taking one example, does the theft of over 200 kilograms of nuclear material that happened on the 26th of August 2021, over its last 2 decades in India pose a serious threat of nuclear terrorism, because nuclear terrorism is a harsh reality which exists. Doesn't this also raise serious questions over the safety, security of the fissile material and the stockpiles that are present within India, and necessitate action by the global powers and the IAEA to address poor safety standards in the country?
It does, especially when the fact is that India has been part of many international agreements. Some can be voluntary and some are not just voluntary. For example, India is also part of International Convention of Physical Protection of CPPNM, and as well as its amendment in 2005. India is part of Suppression of Acts of Nuclear Terrorism, that is a convention as well. The PSI, the Security Initiative, all these things. Despite the fact that India has given its diplomatic commitment to be part of it, if we see it on ground, the national rules and regulations are not at par and are not effective. Hence, they pose a very serious concern, and that concern does not only relate to its neighboring countries, it can relate generally everywhere, because if you find out or if you are able to gather a gang which has nuclear material, the origin of that nuclear material can be traced back, and you have seen over 200 kgs are of that origin which has been traced. There may be many cases which have not even been caught. So considering the fact that such nuclear material, such heavily radioactive nuclear material can be used by non-state actors, and we can also see that it is not only the black market within India. For example, way back in the past, Joshua Pollock had written an article in which he said the global terrorism, the proliferation network which was going on, that the 5th customer or the 4th customer of that network was India. So we need to be very wary of the fact that there have been things happening, but the US and international bodies have turned a blind eye. There are several reasons for that, which are right there. For example, because India provides a nuclear military industrial complex to the West, India is used as a counterweight to China. But however, these incidents should be a reminder for the West that despite the fact that you use India to counter China, that should not be at the cost of many civilians. Because for instance, if this radioactive material goes into the environment, if it pollutes water, it can have serious repercussions.
What if it goes in the wrong hands? What if it is sold to the wrong people? You know, this is the illegal trade of nuclear technology and materials. It is, it is extremely important to curb it, to say the least, and to stop such elements from perpetrating such heinous designs. But that has been happening in India since decades, and nothing concrete has been done. We haven't seen any concrete measure, whether it be an internal mechanism that is evolved as far as taking care of such incidents is concerned, or internationally, because state and non-state actors can really benefit from this illegal trade, can't they?
They can, and one scenario I would like to post here is, for instance, there have been many terrorist incidents in Pakistan which were traced back to India. They have been on conventional scale. However, just imagine if such material is given to terrorists and they try to use it within Pakistan through a dirty bomb. How would that happen? Definitely it would escalate the conflict, and the serious repercussions would be seen by the international community, not just by South Asian neighbors.
Let's talk laws laws and regulations. The United Nations Security Council Resolution 1540 and the International Atomic Energy Agency Convention of the Physical Protection of Nuclear Materials, which you talked about, CPPNM, makes it binding, I have to say it again, binding on states to ensure stringent measures to prevent nuclear material from falling into the wrong hands. But this nuclear material has been falling into the wrong hands since the last few decades. Given the history, shouldn't India be considered as one of the most vulnerable countries in the world as when it comes to nuclear safety and security?
Definitely. Now it is high time that the international community should table maybe a resolution in UN. Even Pakistan could take the lead, because Pakistan has been constantly stating that despite the fact that nuclear security is a national responsibility, you cannot get complacent.
Because the implications are regional and global.
And global as well. So that is why it is high time that international community should either grey list India in this field, and the kind of waivers that India is given. What international community could do is, for example, India is part of many export control regimes. For example, India is part of MTCR, Australia Group, Wezenar Arrangement, apart from NSG, which is still not a part of. What those regimes could do is that they can do barter trade. They can sort of put brackets on Indian nuclear safety and security and ask India, even the Indo-US nuclear agreement and all those countries, 13 plus deals that India has with other countries, they can come on the state level and talk to Indians and say, look, this is a serious concern. Either you work on it and then we'll bargain and give you what you need, or they can put a pressure on India. But the thing is, who is going to take the lead? Who is going to do that?
That is the question, because of the geostrategic or geopolitical presence of India, and as you said, the countermeasure to China. A lot of countries are turning a blind eye to whatever India has been doing and continues to do. Pakistan, as you yourself have said, has called for a thorough investigation of all such incidents and has sought measures to strengthen the security of nuclear materials to prevent their diversions. Don't you feel such incidents point to we've already talked about lax controls, poor regulatory enforcement mechanisms, possible existence of a black market to nuclear materials outside India, and do you also not feel, because this is why Pakistan has been highlighting it time and again, that such incidents pose a risk of a nuclear exchange due to miscalculations between nuclear armed India and Pakistan? I'd again like to refer to the BrahMos incident.
Yes, definitely, because nuclear is not only about nuclear material. The nuclear technologies are also part, the platforms, the delivery systems, the capabilities, all these things come under the ambit of a nuclear weapon state, right? If the way the BrahMos incident happened, what if there is a rogue officer who takes a missile and just fires it, similar to the BrahMos case, but what if that missile is canisterized? For example, now India is going towards smurving of missiles. Now India is going towards canisterization, in which the delivery system and the missile, they are all mated and they are all together. That means they are ready to fire within minutes. And there is very less response time between India and Pakistan. If something like that happens, Pakistan would be put into spot. What should Pakistan do? So that is the whole reason. The idea right now would be for India and Pakistan and the international players should force India to come on the table and talk, and dialogue is the only solution to this. Once the dialogue starts, there are many risk reduction measures that can be taken between two countries, and we have many instances where we have many confidence building measures with India which are still sort of working. So why not try to increase those and propose
will India
more
listen?
confidence
Will India
building
listen?
measures?
I mean, that is the
but
whole question,
will
isn't
India
it?
Listen? Yeah.
11 states in India have uranium reserves. Andhra Pradesh, Jharkhand and Meghalaya have recorded the largest reserves of radioactive material. Nuclear security is a national responsibility. Now, nuclear threats and potential consequences of such terrorism can transcend international borders. There are one or two angles to it. One of that you have already talked about, involvement of insiders. It shows the number of incidents that have happened that there is some kind of mechanism through which somebody from within is supplying such radioactive material. Then there is a gap in the material accounting and control systems, from uranium mines to enrichment facilities and reactors. Then the recurrence of these lapses with such impunity indicates serious issues when it comes to nuclear security culture in India. Looking at all of these points, don't you feel that India is answerable to the world? We don't see any logical explanation that has come out of all of these incidents, because any person with a sane sense of morality or understanding would say, why is this happening? How is this happening? Why isn't there a logical explanation? We haven't yet seen a logical explanation from India. What's your take on that?
One thing that I want to say here is the way we see the pattern of these incidents that are already happening, and there are many which are shoved under the carpet and are not reported, so or not even caught, then we can say that there is a proper underworld dog thing going on. There is a proper nuclear black market which is very active within India, because there were many uranium radiological material. There was this that was captured in Nepal and many in different states. The origin was from India. That is happening. And another thing that I would like to focus here is that in the US, there have been a number of times when in 2002, 2003, in 2004, 2007, Indian citizens, they were sanctioned because they were involved in proliferation of nuclear technology. So it's not just the material. So overall, another important aspect we need to focus here about is that there are many Maoist and Nazalite insurgencies happening in India.
Imagine if it comes in their hands.
Exactly, and also there are many guerrilla groups that are there in India. So imagine if those non-state actors take part and get such a material, what would happen within India? It's not just about bombing Pakistan. What if India is destroyed from within? So that is why it is very important for the Indian administration to actually get their heads together and work on this issue.
Should India take some cues from Pakistan? That is a very responsible nuclear state. It takes its nuclear responsibility extremely seriously. We've never had an incident such as this in our past. Nuclear safety and security are based on multiple layers and defense in-depth concepts. Maybe India should come to Pakistan and see, I mean, Pakistan will not show it, but at least it can give it some tips on how to take seriously its nuclear proliferation.
Interestingly, Pakistan has been training many international members of IAEA under the ambit of IAEA for nuclear safety and security, and Pakistan would obviously welcome Indians as well. Another important aspect is that Pakistan has been always very confident because we have never had a security lapse. Our personal reliability program is top notch and it keeps on getting better and better. So the idea is that India should take the sample of how Pakistan has been good at nuclear safety and security and apply it domestically. Good practices need to be replicated, and there are issues with Indian personal reliability program as well. For example, there were many scientists who gave away, who used radioactive material to poison their other employees. So just imagine what kind of personal reliability program would that be?
Well, but India has this habit of using the Pakistan card. I just wish it can use a Pakistan card to come and understand how Pakistan, takes its nuclear safety seriously. Thank you so very much, Anum, to have joined us. Anum A, strategic and nuclear safety expert, joining us and talking to us about this incident that has happened in India. And there's a series of such incidents that have been happening in India since the 70s, 80s, and so on and so forth. Let's come to our last two stories very quickly. The first concerns mountaineer Muradsatpara, who has passed away at Broad Peak. He went missing after being injured on Broad Peak, and he has tragically passed away. His death was confirmed today by Ayaz Shigri, who is the vice president of the Alpine Club. He was working as a guide for a Portuguese female climber during a summit of Broad Peak. Satpara's team had turned around without submitting, as conditions around the summit were not that good. Murad was hired only to go to Camp 3, so he waited there. They were all descending to base camp, and Murad got in on his head by a rock. The rock must have been quite big because he was still wearing a helmet. The body of Murad Satpara was found this morning around 6 a.m. and will be brought to his native village Satpara by this evening. Our deepest and more profound condolences to the family of Murad Satpara. Finally, today is the International Youth Day. The theme of this day this year is From Clicks to Progress, Youth Digital Pathways for Sustainable Development. Both our President Asif Ali Zardari Sahab and Shehbaz Sharif Sahab have vowed to foster supportive environment for the youth of Pakistan that are in a majority as far as our country is concerned. They have both said that the youth of Pakistan are the most valuable asset, as they are the dreamers and the leaders of tomorrow. indeed. With that, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new segments and stories that pertain to us. You in Pakistan. Stay safe. Allah Hafiz.